So now we're going to start painting our northern lights. So I'm starting with an iridescent violet blue paint. These are made by PBO and they're really, really pretty and have a little bit of a shimmer to them. So I have about a medium-sized stencil brush and I'm just stenciling how I want my northern lights to look. And I recommend before you do this, either you can do exactly what I'm doing there on the canvas, or you can go and Google northern lights and just take a look at some images just to see. There's so many varieties, you really can't go wrong. But just gives you an idea of how you may want yours to look. So after I stencil the paint in my formation, I'm taking a 1-inch flat brush and I'm just lightly brushing the paint up to get the streaky kind of look to it. I can do that with the same brush all the way through. And I try to make it so that some of the streaks are a little bit longer, some are shorter. And then I'm going to take a big dry paintbrush and I'm just going to lightly streak that up. Now, the paint, once it's streaked up with the big paintbrush, is so dry or so thin that it really doesn't move a whole lot. But if there's any little bit of a blob anywhere, it's just going to help streak that up. I added some more to the bottom and that's going to go behind the trees on my canvas. I'm taking that same brush again and I'm just lightly brushing them up. So now you want to make sure you completely let this dry before you go to the next step. The paint is so thin, it only really takes about 5, maybe 10 minutes, so it doesn't take that long. The second color that we're using is an iridescent blue-green. And I'm going to follow that same formation that I used at the for the pink, and I'm going to use put my blue in those areas. So my stencil brush this time is slightly smaller than the first because I want to have a little bit less paint. I don't want to completely cover that first color. I want to see a little bit of it. And I'm following exactly the same, like I said, formation that I used for the first one. So pouncing the paint in place. I tend to make sure that some areas are a little bit thinner and some areas are a little bit thicker. And now I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush and I'm brushing it up. Make sure that you clean your brushes between each and every single step. We don't want to leave acrylic paint on a brush and let it dry because you're going to completely ruin your brush that way, and we don't want to ruin our brushes. So you can see that I'm pulling that paint up again exactly the same way as I pulled it the first time, but I'm not doing it quite as high because I have a little bit less paint. I want to still see some of that first color. I'm putting a little bit down on the bottom as well. So the ones on the bottom are just going to be right behind my tree line. So they don't need to be perfect, and some of it is going to be covered completely. And then I'm taking my big brush and I'm just lightly brushing it up. And again, most of the paint isn't going to move at that point, but if there's any little blobs left, it will. So now I'm taking an iridescent green yellow, and this color is really quite strong, so I'm not putting it over all of the lines. You'll notice that I just put it in little areas, and I'm using a really tiny stencil brush for this part. And again, lighter on the paint as well. I want to see some of this green color, but I don't want it to overpower my painting in any way. Once I have it where I want, I'm going to take that same 1-inch flat brush and I'm going to streak it up. So it's just going to end up highlighting some areas with a bit more of a bright green color. Again, I typically try to make sure that some streaks up higher than others, so it's not one continuous even line all the way up. And then I'm going to add some of that green to the bottom and then streak that up as well. Once again, a lot of this is going to be covered, so it's just going to be a little bit of the light behind the trees. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to take my big brush again and I'm going to streak it all the way up and let that completely dry.